What happens when leniency meets broken trust? Step inside a courtroom where one man's freedom is on the line. A judge's patience reaches its limit, and consequences collide with accountability. This dramatization explores the high-stakes tension of law, responsibility, and redemption. But remember, it's inspired by legal events, not a real case. Watch closely to see how every decision and action shapes the outcome. The courtroom was unusually quiet, but the tension was palpable. Everyone knew that today's session was not going to be routine. The defendant, Derek Hayes, a young man in his late 20s, had appeared for what was supposed to be a standard bond check-in. Yet, the whispers around the gallery suggested something was seriously wrong. Judge Evelyn Carter, known for her strict but fair approach, entered the courtroom with her usual air of authority. Her eyes scanned the room, landing momentarily on Derek, who fidgeted nervously at the defense table. He avoided making direct eye contact, his hands clenched into fists, betraying the anxiety that had been building for weeks. Derek's lawyer, Maya Reynolds, a seasoned attorney with a reputation for calm strategy under pressure, gave him a reassuring nod. "Stay composed," she whispered. "We'll handle this." Derek swallowed hard, trying to calm the rapid beat of his heart. The bailiff called the court to order, and Judge Carter adjusted her robe before taking her seat. "We are here for the bond compliance review of Derek Hayes," she began. Her tone was measured, but there was a quiet intensity that immediately set the stage for seriousness. "It has come to the court's attention that there are issues requiring discussion." The courtroom murmured as the probation officer approached the stand. "Your Honor," the officer began, "Mr. Hayes' latest tests indicate the presence of alcohol and THC in violation of his bond conditions." A sudden tension gripped the room. Derek's stomach sank. He had hoped his actions would remain private, but the courtroom atmosphere made it clear that discretion had limits. The prosecution's table shifted slightly, the lead prosecutor, Harold Benton, leaning forward with a stern expression. Benton had a reputation for being unforgiving when rules were broken, and today he seemed ready to demonstrate that fully. Judge Carter's gaze fixed on Derek, and the silence that followed was heavy enough to feel oppressive. "Mr. Hayes," she said, her voice sharp but controlled, "it is my understanding that you have knowingly violated the conditions of your bond by consuming substances explicitly prohibited. Is this correct?" Derek's throat felt dry. He opened his mouth to speak, but words seemed to fail him. Maya Reynolds leaned in, ready to interject if necessary, but also hoping that Derek could take responsibility in his own words. "Yes, Your Honor," Derek finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. The confession seemed to intensify the judge's stare, and the entire courtroom felt the weight of the moment. Judge Carter leaned back slightly, her hands folded on the bench. "I expected honesty during these hearings," she said slowly, letting the words sink in. "But I also expected compliance. The rules of the court are clear. They are not suggestions. They are conditions tied to your freedom while this case proceeds." Prosecutor Benton rose, his voice firm. "Your Honor, the defendant's repeated disregard for bond conditions shows a blatant lack of respect for the law. It cannot be overlooked." Maya Reynolds countered immediately, her tone calm but resolute. "With all due respect, Your Honor, my client has acknowledged his mistakes. He understands the consequences and is willing to participate in any corrective measures the court deems appropriate. Punitive measures should be balanced with opportunities for rehabilitation, not simply condemnation." Judge Carter's eyes narrowed slightly. "Mr. Hayes, do you understand that the court's patience has limits?" she asked directly. The gallery leaned in, sensing the confrontation escalating. Derek nodded, swallowing again. The reality of his situation pressing down on him like a heavy weight. The tension in the room was not just between the judge and the defendant. It was the unspoken struggle between two perspectives, one demanding strict accountability and consequences, the other advocating for understanding, correction, and the chance to learn from mistakes. The courtroom had become a stage where these opposing viewpoints clashed in a very real and human way. Maya reminded the court of Derek's background, highlighting his attempts at maintaining employment and community involvement. "Your Honor," she said, "he is young, yes, but he is committed to correcting his behavior. A strict punitive approach will not achieve the outcome we seek: genuine accountability and lasting change." Benton shook his head. "With respect, counsel, repeated violations signal that verbal promises are insufficient. Only a firm message, reinforced by consequences, can ensure compliance." Judge Carter considered both arguments, her fingers lightly tapping the bench. Her expression was unreadable, yet the energy in the room shifted with every passing second. The conflict was clear: accountability versus rehabilitation, consequence versus compassion. Derek's gaze fell to his hands, and he whispered under his breath, "I didn't mean to make this worse." Judge Carter caught the faint murmur. "Mr. Hayes," she said sharply, "your intentions do not absolve the actions. The court must consider the facts, the pattern, and the message sent to both you and the community." The courtroom felt suffocatingly tense, the kind of intensity that makes every spectator sit forward, every lawyer and officer attentive, every moment weighted with significance. Today, what was supposed to be a routine check-in had escalated into a confrontation that would challenge the boundaries of patience, authority, and the consequences of broken trust. As the morning session drew toward a brief recess, whispers filled the gallery. People discussed what had transpired, speculating on Judge Carter's next move, wondering how far she would push, and whether Derek's acknowledgement of guilt would mitigate or exacerbate the outcome. Outside the courtroom, the tension was mirrored in the eyes of Derek's family. They whispered softly, hoping for mercy, but bracing for consequences. Inside, Judge Carter's gavel had yet to strike, but already the story of accountability, consequence, and confrontation had captivated everyone present. One thing was clear: this case was no longer routine. The courtroom had transformed into a stage where lessons about trust, responsibility, and accountability were about to be learned the hard way. The courtroom reconvened after a short recess, and the atmosphere had grown heavier. Spectators whispered among themselves, anticipating the next exchange, while Derek Hayes fidgeted nervously at the defense table. Maya Reynolds, his lawyer, gave him a calm nod. "Stay focused," she whispered. "We'll get through this together." Judge Carter entered and took her seat with her usual quiet authority. "Let's proceed," she said, her tone measured but firm. "We will address the bond violations and determine appropriate consequences. I expect full transparency from everyone involved." Prosecutor Benton stood immediately. "Your Honor, we are prepared to outline the repeated violations. The defendant's recent test results indicate alcohol and THC consumption. This is a direct breach of bond conditions and demonstrates a lack of respect for the court's rules." Maya Reynolds countered, her voice steady. "Your Honor, while my client acknowledges the failed tests, he is willing to participate in rehabilitation programs, counseling, or any other corrective measures the court deems necessary. Punitive action should be balanced with opportunities to correct behavior." Judge Carter's gaze shifted to Derek. "Mr. Hayes, the court takes these violations seriously. Do you understand that repeated failure to comply with bond conditions may result in revocation of your release?" Derek nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, Your Honor," he said quietly, his voice trembling. The courtroom was tense, the gallery silent. Every word seemed to hang in the air, charged with the potential to shape Derek's immediate future. Benton stepped closer to the bench, emphasizing the prosecution's point. "Your Honor, leniency has been extended before, Yet the defendant's choices demonstrate disregard. The court must act decisively to reinforce the seriousness of compliance. Judge Carter leaned forward slightly, her eyes sharp. "Mr. Hayes," she said, "intentions alone do not excuse behavior. The court must balance accountability with fairness. Your actions have consequences not just for you, but for the trust placed in this process." Maya spoke up again, her tone calm but assertive. "Your Honor, my client is young and acknowledges his mistakes. He is willing to take corrective action immediately. Revocation may not achieve the goal of genuine accountability. Structured rehabilitation could have a more lasting impact." Benton shook his head. "Counsel, repeated violations suggest verbal promises are insufficient. Without firm consequences, there is little assurance compliance will occur." Judge Carter raised her hand to silence both parties, a subtle reminder of her authority. "I have listened to both perspectives. This court values fairness, correction, and accountability equally. However, repeated bond violations cannot be ignored. Mr. Hayes, you will be required to undergo enhanced supervision, including daily check-ins, random drug and alcohol testing, and participation in a structured counseling program. Failure to comply will result in immediate revocation of your bond." A murmur ran through the gallery. Derek exhaled slowly, relief mixing with apprehension. He had avoided the harshest possible consequences, but the severity of the court's decision was clear. Compliance would now be strictly monitored. Judge Carter continued, her tone firm but measured. "This is a critical lesson, Mr. Hayes. The court extends trust when rules are followed. When trust is broken, consequences follow. The path to rehabilitation requires responsibility, honesty, and commitment. You are expected to adhere to these terms fully." Benton nodded, satisfied that the court's ruling reinforced the message he sought to convey. Maya leaned slightly toward Derek, giving him a reassuring glance. "This is a chance to show the court and yourself that you can take responsibility and make changes," she said quietly. The afternoon progressed with further clarification on the monitoring program. Derek would be enrolled in a combination of counseling sessions and supervised check-ins, ensuring accountability. Judge Carter emphasized that success depended on consistency, transparency, and cooperation. Even with the tension, moments of levity surfaced. Judge Carter occasionally made subtle comments about procedural quirks, keeping the courtroom alert while reminding everyone that fairness and focus could coexist with measured humor. The atmosphere, though serious, allowed the audience to follow the proceedings with engagement rather than dread. By the end of the day, the courtroom had absorbed a powerful lesson. Accountability requires both recognition of mistakes and tangible steps toward correction. Derek Hayes had been confronted directly. The gravity of his actions had been made clear, and the court had provided a path for redemption. Outside the courtroom, whispers of the decision spread quickly. Some spectators commented on the firmness of Judge Carter, others on Maya's skillful advocacy, and yet others on Benton's insistence on consequence. Marcus's family, observing Derek's resolve, felt a cautious sense of hope. Inside the courthouse, Derek understood the challenge ahead. Compliance would be strict, but the structure offered a chance to regain trust and demonstrate responsibility. He had faced the court's fury and survived. But only his actions from this point forward would determine whether he truly learned from this confrontation. Judge Carter adjourned the session, leaving the courtroom with a clear message: leniency has limits, and broken trust carries consequences. The tension, lessons, and accountability would linger beyond the walls of the courthouse. A reminder to all present that justice is measured not just by punishment, but by opportunity for correction. The following morning, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Word of Derek Hayes' bond violations and Judge Carter's stern ruling had spread, drawing a larger audience than usual. Reporters, community members, and even law students filled the seats, eager to witness how the case would proceed under the court's strict supervision. Derek sat at the defense table, his posture tense. Maya Reynolds reviewed her notes quietly, ensuring that every argument and mitigating factor would be clearly presented. Derek's hands trembled slightly as he gripped the edge of the table, the reality of heightened scrutiny settling in. Judge Carter entered promptly, her robe flowing and her expression serious. "We are here to review Mr. Hayes' compliance with the court-ordered bond conditions," she began, her voice commanding attention. "I expect honesty, clarity, and respect from all parties." Prosecutor Benton was first to speak. "Your Honor, Mr. Hayes' previous violations were concerning, and today's review will determine whether he has made any effort toward compliance. The court must consider the integrity of the bond system and the message sent to the community." Maya immediately responded, emphasizing Derek's proactive steps. "Your Honor, my client has attended all scheduled counseling sessions, complied with initial check-ins, and demonstrated a sincere commitment to correct his behavior. While the violations were serious, there is evidence of corrective action and genuine effort." Judge Carter leaned forward, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Mr. Hayes, this court must hear from you directly. Have you complied with the requirements outlined yesterday? Have you participated fully in counseling and supervision programs?" Derek inhaled deeply. "Yes, Your Honor," he replied, his voice steadier than the previous day. "I followed the instructions, attended the sessions, and understand the seriousness of my actions. I'm committed to correcting my mistakes." Benton's brow furrowed. "Your Honor, the defendant's prior behavior raises questions about reliability. How can we be certain these efforts are genuine and not simply temporary compliance under pressure?" Judge Carter's gaze shifted to Derek, sharp and unwavering. "Mr. Hayes' actions, not words, determine trust. Today, the court will assess whether compliance is consistent, observable, and accountable. I expect transparency from all parties, including your counsel." Maya interjected carefully. "Your Honor, Mr. Hayes has provided verification of his counseling attendance, submitted to supervised testing, and demonstrated punctuality and commitment. These are measurable actions confirming genuine effort." The courtroom watched in rapt attention as Judge Carter asked pointed questions about schedules, check-ins, and adherence to specific requirements. Derek answered each with honesty, even acknowledging minor slips that had occurred under supervision. His candidness impressed the judge, but Benton remained vigilant, probing for inconsistencies or gaps in compliance. Then came a tense moment. The probation officer presented a recent test result indicating trace amounts of THC in Derek's system. Benton rose immediately. "Your Honor, this result indicates ongoing violation, albeit minor. The defendant's commitment is still in question." Judge Carter's eyes narrowed, the room silent. "Mr. Hayes," she said slowly, "even minor lapses are taken seriously. Explain this discrepancy." Derek swallowed hard, voice sincere. "Your Honor, I unknowingly ingested a product that contained trace THC. It was unintentional, but I understand it doesn't excuse the result. I accept responsibility and will take further measures to prevent recurrence." Maya added, "Your Honor, the defendant has already implemented stricter precautions and reporting measures. The trace result was not deliberate, and he has demonstrated consistent accountability otherwise." Judge Carter considered both sides, her expression stern yet measured. "Mr. Hayes, intent matters, but actions matter more. You will continue under enhanced supervision, including stricter testing protocols. Compliance will be closely monitored, and failure will result in immediate bond revocation." Benton nodded, recognizing the court's firmness. Maya gave Derek a reassuring glance, and he exhaled. Realizing the gravity of continued compliance, The rest of the day involved a detailed discussion of monitoring procedures, reporting schedules, and additional counseling requirements. Judge Carter emphasized that redemption required sustained, observable responsibility. The courtroom observed the delicate balance between accountability and opportunity for correction. By late afternoon, the atmosphere had shifted from confrontation to structured oversight. Derek understood that leniency had limits, and Judge Carter's measured guidance was intended to teach accountability while allowing for correction. As the session concluded, the gallery buzzed with discussion. Spectators commented on the judge's firmness, the lawyer's strategic advocacy, and the prosecutor's persistence. Outside, Derek reflected on the consequences of his actions, recognizing that the courtroom confrontation had become a defining moment not just legally, but personally. Maya whispered to him as they left the courtroom, "This is your chance to prove you can follow through. Take it seriously, and you'll demonstrate true accountability." Derek nodded, the weight of responsibility settling firmly on his shoulders. Judge Carter adjourned the session, leaving the courtroom with a clear message: honesty, effort, and consistency determine trust, and consequences follow when those principles are ignored. Derek had faced the court's fury, learned the limits of leniency, and now had the opportunity to prove himself under strict supervision. The next morning, the courtroom was buzzing quietly with anticipation. Everyone understood that today's session would determine whether Derek Hayes had truly learned from his mistakes and could continue under the court's supervision. Reporters, community members, and friends of the defendant filled the gallery, all aware that the outcome would send a strong message about accountability and consequences. Judge Evelyn Carter entered the courtroom, her presence commanding immediate attention. "We are here to review Mr. Hayes' compliance and determine the appropriate course going forward," she said firmly. Her gaze swept the courtroom, pausing briefly on Derek, whose nervousness was tempered by a growing sense of determination. Maya Reynolds, Derek's lawyer, had prepared him thoroughly. "Remember, honesty and clarity," she whispered. "Answer every question truthfully." Derek nodded, taking a deep breath. Prosecutor Benton rose first. "Your Honor, the defendant has made efforts toward compliance, but recent test results show a minor THC presence. While not intentional, it raises questions about vigilance and responsibility." Judge Carter's eyes locked on Derek. "Mr. Hayes, do you understand the implications of these results?" "Yes, Your Honor," Derek replied firmly. "I take full responsibility and have implemented stricter measures to prevent any recurrence." The judge paused, considering the balance between consequence and opportunity. "Intent matters, but actions matter more. You have demonstrated progress, but ongoing compliance will be strictly monitored." Benton nodded, signaling acknowledgement. Maya added, "Your Honor, Derek has consistently attended counseling sessions, completed check-ins, and shown genuine effort to follow all court requirements. The minor trace was unintentional, and he is committed to full compliance going forward." Judge Carter's gaze softened slightly, yet her tone remained firm. "This court believes in accountability and the chance for correction. You will continue under enhanced supervision, including random testing, daily check-ins, and strict counseling requirements. Any further violations will result in immediate bond revocation. Do you understand and accept these terms?" "Yes, Your Honor," Derek replied, his voice steady and sincere. The courtroom exhaled collectively. Spectators whispered, acknowledging the clarity and firmness of the judge's decision. Derek's family, previously anxious, now allowed themselves cautious relief. The structured oversight was strict, but it offered Derek the opportunity to prove himself and rebuild trust. Judge Carter addressed the courtroom, emphasizing the broader lesson. "This case is a reminder that leniency has limits. Trust must be earned through consistent, responsible action. Courts offer opportunities to correct mistakes, but accountability is never optional. Everyone here should take note. Actions carry consequences, and integrity is non-negotiable. Benton nodded in agreement, accepting the court's measured balance of firmness and opportunity. Maya placed a reassuring hand on Derek's shoulder, signaling support for the challenging road ahead. Derek, feeling the weight of responsibility yet relieved by the structured path provided, reflected on the consequences of his actions. Today, he had faced the court's fury, acknowledged his mistakes, and been given a clear framework to regain trust. The courtroom confrontation had transformed from a moment of fear into a defining turning point in his life. As the session concluded, Judge Carter's final words resonated throughout the courtroom. Compliance, honesty, and responsibility are not just rules, they are principles that define your freedom and future. The court expects these principles to be followed without exception. Outside the courthouse, reporters documented the outcome. Community members discussed the significance of accountability, and Derek's family embraced him with quiet relief. Maya reminded Derek that trust, once broken, must be rebuilt consistently. This is your chance to show the court and yourself what accountability truly means, she said. Derek walked out with a renewed sense of purpose. He had learned that actions, not intentions, determined freedom and trust. The courtroom experience had been intense, but it provided a structured path for correction, demonstrating the power of measured consequences, responsibility, and transparency. The story concluded with clarity. Accountability is essential, mistakes must be addressed, and opportunities for correction exist, but only if they are approached with honesty, consistency, and genuine effort. Derek Hayes' journey was now one of redemption under strict supervision, a lesson that resonated beyond the walls of the courtroom.